Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, one of the countries sitting at this table has publicly stated that it wants to annex our country. On the 16th of December, its president demanded that we immediately hand over our land, our oil, and our minerals because they supposedly belong to them. He said that if we did not comply with his ultimatum, he would unleash the fury of the greatest navy in history on our country. Mr. President, we are in the presence of a power that acts outside of international law, demanding that Venezuelans vacate our country and hand over our Orinoco River, our Lake Maracaibo, our Margarita Island, our beaches, rivers, plains, and mountains. Otherwise, he will carry out an armed attack, which he has been announcing for weeks. This is the greatest extortion known in our history, a gigantic crime of aggression in progress, beyond all rational parameters, all legal logic, all historical precedent. But it's not just about Venezuela. The ambition is continental. The U.S. government has expressed this in its national security strategy, which states that the future of the continent belongs to them, with the enactment of the Monroe Doctrine in the 21st century now aggravated by the Trump corollary. Our liberator Simón Bolívar warned of this more than 200 years ago when he said, and I quote, that the United States seemed to be destined by Providence to plague Latin America with misery in the name of liberty. End of quote. We want to alert the world. Venezuela is only the first target of a larger plan. The U.S. government wants us to be divided so it can conquer us piece by piece. The United States, which was an indispensable country in the construction of the United Nations and in the drafting of its founding charter, has today become an actor that seeks to impose itself on the fundamental rights of all states in the Western Hemisphere, even at the cost of destroying the UN. We have requested this meeting, aware that the U.S. government will not allow this body to adopt a decision that would put a stop to its sinister plan. The world should know that last November, the U.S. government was the only one that prevented an agreement in the Security Council to condemn attacks against civilians on the high seas and to call for détente, dialogue, and diplomacy. The U.S. government is preventing the Security Council from fulfilling its mandate. If in 1945 that country was a force for good, today it has become a state that threatens international law and peace and security. The world must know that the threat is not Venezuela. The threat is the current U.S. government. Mr. President, the murders in the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean carried out by the U.S. government of the last few months are the first evidence of its plan to impose its power in the region in flagrant violation of international law and human rights. There have been more than 29 attacks resulting in more than 101 victims, non-combatant civilians, in the absence of armed conflict, who were coldly murdered, violating their right to the presumption of innocence and due process. Let it be clear once and for all that there is no war in the Caribbean. There is no international armed conflict, nor is there a non-international one, which is why it is absurd for the U.S. government to seek to justify its actions by applying the rules of war. The invocation of Article 51 of the United Nations Charter to explain terrorism against civilians, masked by the argument of self-defense, is a perverse distortion of the law attempting to turn small unarmed boats in the Caribbean, thousands of kilometers from the United States, into alleged perpetrators of an armed attack with weapons of mass destruction. These are extrajudicial executions, willful killings committed by military force against unarmed civilians. We stated that before the Security Council on the 10th of October. Today, it is absolutely clear that the U.S. government is not only violating international law, but also its own domestic legislation. Today, when there are 4 times as many victims, they do not dare to show the recorded evidence of the killings because their cruelty would provoke worldwide revulsion. Despite this, today, with more than 100 victims, the killer who roams the Caribbean claims that there is no end in sight to their crimes against humanity. Mr. President, on 16th of December, President Donald Trump publicly stated the following, and I quote, "Today, I'm ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going in and out of Venezuela," end of quote. This is a confession of a crime, specifically a crime of aggression, with which the President of the United States intends to turn back the clock of history 200 years to impose a colony on Venezuela. On 10th of December, meanwhile, U.S. military units violently assaulted a vessel engaged in lawful international trade in international waters in the Caribbean. They subdued and kidnapped the entire crew and illegally seized the cargo of Venezuelan oil, which was part of a legitimate and regular commercial operation. It was a robbery carried out by military force, which sets an extremely serious precedent for the safety of navigation and international trade. The illegal use of state force to carry out theft on the high seas is worse than piracy, since in this case it is not only a matter of stealing commercial vessels, which is evidence of intentionality and violating their rights to navigate in international waters, but also of the de facto annexation of the entire Caribbean Sea by a naval power. In doing so, in addition to violating Venezuela's inalienable right to trade legally with the world, it seeks to deny all countries the right to trade with Venezuela. Just 3 days ago, on 20th of December, a second act of the same nature took place, when another vessel carrying Venezuelan oil was similarly seized by the U.S. military forces in international waters in the Caribbean. The cargo was stolen, and the crew has been kidnapped. Immediately afterwards, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth indicated that such criminal operations would continue, while President Trump declared that he would keep the stolen cargo.